On the 26th of July, 2023, a Reddit user called Odyssey007 uploaded a post to the narco footage subreddit titled Sinaloans Nazi Fanatics. The post showed 4 different images related to the son of the Sinaloa cartel, El Chapo Guzman, and to the cartel in general. Images showcasing arms and drug packages branded and emblazoned with Nazi symbolism, swastikas on a package, Nazi eagle on a gun. Odyssey007, just like you and I, was highly confused to just be learning that cartels seem to be filled with neo-Nazis and Nazi sympathizers. But the real question here is, how? How did an old hateful ideology from the 20th century rear its ugly head in the most dangerous organization today? In this video, I'll explain what happened behind the scenes and why cartels today are Nazi fanatics. The German-American Exodus. The German-American Exodus didn't start today or after the influx of the Nazis post-World War II. No, it all started way back in 1528 when Emperor Charles V gave a concession to the Welser Bank from Augsburg in present-day Venezuela. They tried to settle in Coro, but things didn't go as planned. The Germans couldn't properly administer the natives, so the colony didn't flourish, leading to the concession being revoked in 1548. As time passed, German merchants settled in various Latin American port cities. Some of them even married local women, became landowners, and joined the local elite. There were also German mercenaries fighting in Brazil and other civil wars during that period. In the 1830s, the Brazilian government brought German peasants to colonize the southern frontier. They settled in Santa Catarina, Rio Grande do Sul, and later Parana. Moving along the rivers, they formed rural and small-town communities that retained a Germanic touch for more than a century. Chile wasn't left out either. They brought Hessian colonists to their southern frontier in the 1850s and 1860s. These folks created their own little Germanic zone, isolated from the rest of the Chilean population centers. There were even some famous names involved, like Bernhard Forster, who was Friedrich Nietzsche's brother-in-law. He led a colony in Paraguay in the 1880s. The Germans didn't stop there. They kept on founding or joining agricultural colonies in places like southern Brazil, Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay. They played a significant role in opening up Argentina's Misiones territory between the 2 world wars. Also during the 17th and 18th centuries, German Jesuits like Martin Dobrizhofer made their mark in Paraguay and the Rio de la Plata region. Again, fast forward to the 19th century, and we see waves of ethnic Germans heading to Mexico. What drew them there, you ask? Various factors. But one big thing was the liberal policies of President Porfirio Diaz. That guy knew how to make Mexico look like a sweet deal. Now, not all these Germans were the same. Some came with bags full of resources, ready to take on opportunities in commerce, industry, and education. They were like, we're here to make it big, but others didn't have much dough to spare. They settled for being farmers or employees. So, where did they settle down? Oh, you bet they picked some prime spots. Mexico City, Puebla, Veracruz, and even the northern states like Sinaloa, Jalisco, and Chihuahua were on their radar. And later they were like, let's take over the Yucatan Peninsula too. Now here's where it gets juicy. The German immigrants had a massive impact on Mexican culture. They revolutionized the dairy, brewing, and musical entertainment industries. Cheese, beer, and music galore. And speaking of music, hold on to your hats because this is the real deal. The northern regional musical subgenres like Tejano, Banda, Ranchera, and Norteño got a unique German touch. Imagine the fusion of German and Mexican sounds. It must have been an absolute blast. The Mexican Mennonites, who are the descendants of Dutch and Prussian immigrants, have preserved their German heritage and language, particularly in the states of Chihuahua, Durango, Zacatecas, and Aguascalientes. Over the years, the German-Mexican community has really embraced Mexican society, but they've also held on to some of their cultural traits. It's like they've found the perfect blend of being Mexican while keeping their German roots alive. Even though Germany was rising as a world power after 1871, most German immigrants headed to North America. In Latin America, German communities remained relatively small and mostly consisted of well-to-do merchants, bankers, managers, technicians working for German companies in electrical, chemical, metallurgical, and pharmaceutical fields. There were also educators and professionals under contract to Latin American governments. German military advisors even held influence in Chile, Argentina, and Bolivia. Germans in Latin America were quite adaptable to the EIE business and social conditions there. They tended to live in insular, status-conscious communities, mostly Protestant, and were slow to assimilate into the broader culture. World War I brought some tough times. Allied blockades caused hardship, and in countries like Argentina and Brazil, which declared war on Germany in 1917, there were nationalist riots that led to property destruction and terrorizing individuals of German descent. After the war, German immigration to Latin America resumed, but this time it included war veterans, political dissidents, young people with no prospects, business people ruined by inflation, ethnic Germans, and you guessed it, Nazis fleeing conflict and nationalism nationalism in Russia and Eastern Europe. In the 1930s, the Nazi government started promoting pan-German nationalism in overseas German communities, creating the illusion of a resurgent worldwide German cultural community. Nazi publicists claimed there were significant numbers of racial Germans in Latin American countries. This, along with Nazi activities and uprisings, caused fear that German communities might be potential fifth columns as World War II approached. Before World War II began, certain Latin American leaders and groups were drawn to fascism, perceiving it as a positive alternative, largely inspired by figures like Hitler, Mussolini, Hirohito, Franco, and other Axis powers dictators. Fascination with Hitler's style and militaristic rallies was evident in the admiration expressed by leaders like President Rafael Trujillo of the Dominican Republic. Similar sentiments were held by dictators such as Jorge Ubico of Guatemala, Tiburcio Carillas Andino of Honduras, and Maximiliano Hernandez Martinez of El Salvador. In Brazil, Argentina, and Chile, the sense of unity and purpose propagated by fascism held considerable appeal. Fascist political parties had significant influence in these countries, with Brazil's integralists openly admiring Mussolini and displaying their allegiance through their attire. Germany's economic penetration in the region also grew during the pre-war years, facilitated by strict binational trade agreements that aimed at fostering equal economic relationships with Latin American nations. Several countries, including Brazil, Mexico, Guatemala, Costa Rica, and the Dominican Republic, had trade agreements with Nazi Germany. Notably, Brazil's trade with Germany saw substantial growth, doubling between 1933 and 1938, further reflecting the economic ties between South America and Germany during this period. During World War II, there were further restrictions on German communities in Latin America. Most countries in the hemisphere, except Argentina and Chile, declared war on the Axis powers under U.S. persuasion. German businesses faced Allied blockades and blacklists, leading some to adopt local cover or close down. Intrigues involving clandestine German agents and Allied intelligence agencies kept everyone on edge. Axis property was seized, and some dangerous individuals were deported. The U.S. even considered forced assimilation of Germans and the dissolution of German language institutions in the Western Hemisphere, but it was deemed impractical and a violation of Latin American sovereignty, so it wasn't widely implemented. After the war, the United States tried to prevent Germans from migrating to Latin America, but many thousands of veterans, war criminals, political dissidents, and skilled scientists and technicians valuable to Latin American industrialization still managed to make their way there. Since 1945, German-speaking communities in Latin America have become more fragmented and declined, except for some specific regions and colonies. Many of German descent have assimilated into the broader cultural landscape. Nevertheless, German heritage is still celebrated and remembered throughout the region. Now, Argentina was already buzzing with tons of German immigrants, and they had been buddies with Germany during the war. So, after 1945, their president, Juan Perón, who had a thing for fascist ideas himself, got all sneaky too. He called on his intelligence officers and diplomats to set up these secret rat lines. These rat lines were escape routes through Spanish and Italian ports, helping many Nazi folks flee. Oh, but that's not all. The Vatican and Rome also got in on the action. They were helping out Catholic war refugees, which is sweet, but sometimes they lent a hand to fleeing Nazis too. With all these shenanigans going on, a whole network of escape routes and aid popped up. It was like a massive escape party for those fleeing the war's aftermath. And as more Nazis and their buddies joined the South American fiesta, this network just got bigger and bolder. Now here's the juiciest part. Did Hitler himself sneak out of his doomsday bunker and sail across the ocean? Who knows? There's no solid proof, but the existence of this wild escape network does make you wonder, right? Here are some of the Nazis that we know for sure found their way to Latin America. First up, we've got Adolf Eichmann. This guy was the mastermind behind Hitler's evil final solution, which resulted in the murder of around 6 million Jews. He orchestrated the whole Nazi network of death camps like Auschwitz and Treblinka, where innocent people suffered unimaginable horrors. So after the war, Eichmann went into hiding in Austria. Sneaky as can be, he got an Argentine visa with the help of a Franciscan monk in Italy. Under the alias Ricardo Clement, he boarded a steamship to Buenos Aires with his wife and kids, living a normal life in a middle-class suburb, working at a Mercedes-Benz plant. Next up is Dr. Josef Mengele, aka the Angel of Death. This guy was obsessed with twisted experiments and tortured prisoners at Auschwitz. He didn't spare anyone, even innocent children. Mengele fled to Argentina with the help of a Catholic clergy member and later moved around hiding in various South American countries like Paraguay and Brazil. Let us also not forget Erich Priebke, who is infamous for his involvement in the atrocities committed by the Nazis during World War II. He participated in the Action T4 euthanasia program, which targeted individuals with mental and physical disabilities for extermination. Subsequently, Priebke became the commandant of the Sobibor and Treblinka death camps in German-occupied Poland, overseeing the murder of over 100,000 Jews at Sobibor and an estimated 900,000 at Treblinka, making it the second deadliest camp under Nazi control. After the war, Priebke was captured by the Americans, but he managed to escape to Italy from from an Austrian prison camp in 1947. With the assistance of the Austrian bishop Alois Hudal, who sympathized with the Nazis, Priebke obtained a Red Cross passport and traveled to Syria before eventually settling in Brazil in 1951. In 1967, Holocaust survivor and renowned Nazi hunter Simon Wiesenthal tracked down Priebke, who was living under his own name and working for Volkswagen in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Following his arrest, Priebke was extradited to West Germany, where he stood trial and was found guilty of mass murder, leading to a life imprisonment sentence. He passed away in 1971 from heart failure while serving his sentence. Last but not least, we have SS Colonel Walter Roff. This guy was the mastermind behind the mobile gas chambers that killed thousands during the war. He oversaw the modifications of trucks to turn them into deadly gas chambers. Roff was arrested by Allied troops after the war but managed to escape and hide in Italy. He later fled to Ecuador and settled in Chile under his own name. Talk about a villain on the run. Nazis and the cartels. Not all fleeing Nazis were caught immediately. Some outrightly lived a normal life and even started to infect the South American community with Nazi ideology. One of these men was Klaus Barbie, the man who would become known as the Butcher of Lyon. Klaus Barbie was born on October 25, 1913 in Godesberg, which is now part of Bonn. His family hailed from Merzig near the French border. But let me tell you, his childhood wasn't all rainbows and sunshine. His father, also named Nicholas, was a soldier during World War I and got seriously injured and captured by the French. This left his father bitter and struggling with alcohol, and he sadly took out his anger on his children. Klaus attended school in the town where his father taught until he was 10. Then, he went off to a boarding school in Trier, where he was relieved to escape his father's abuse. But life threw more challenges his way when his younger brother Kurt passed away in 1933 from a chronic illness. Later that year, their father also died. This threw Klaus's plans to study theology or become an academic off track, leaving him unemployed. But fate had other plans for Klaus. He was conscripted into the Nazi labor service in 1935 and then joined the SS at the age of 22. He became part of the Sicherheitsdienst, SD, the SS's security service, acting as the Nazi Party's intelligence arm. And to top it all off, he officially became a member of the Nazi Party in 1937. After the Germans took over the Netherlands during World War II, Klaus Barbie was assigned to Amsterdam. He was part of a department responsible for identifying, rounding up, and deporting Dutch Jews and Freemasons. This guy was knee-deep in some serious evil. In October 1940, Barbie arrested Hermanus van Tongeren, the Grand Master of the Grand Orient of the Netherlands. Van Tongeren was sent to a concentration camp and tragically died there in freezing conditions. Barbie even had the audacity to lie to Van Tongeren's daughter Charlotte about her father's death, saying he died of an ear infection and was cremated. But his terror didn't end there. In 1942, he was sent to Dijon, France, and later became the head of the Gestapo in Lyon. His headquarters were at the Hotel Terminus, where he personally tortured countless prisoners, both adults and children. The stories of his brutality are horrifying, with accounts of beatings, skin tearing, and victims' heads being immersed in buckets of ammonia and cold water. Barbie earned the infamous nickname Butcher of Lyon for good reason. Historians estimate that he was directly responsible for the deaths of up to 14,000 people. He played a key role in roundups, like the Rue Sainte Catherine roundup, which saw 84 people arrested in one day. He even captured high-ranking members of the French resistance, like Jean Moulin. And brace yourself for this heart-wrenching detail. In April 1944, Barbie ordered the deportation of 44 Jewish children from an orphanage in Izieu to Auschwitz. This guy had no heart, no mercy. After sending whole families to death camps and committing unimaginable atrocities during World War II, Klaus Barbie somehow managed to escape justice. And here's the jaw-dropping twist. The US recruited him as a CIA spy. Yeah, you heard that right. Instead of facing the consequences for his heinous crimes, Barbie got involved in some shady business. He was smuggled into Bolivia, where he helped create a brutal narco state. Yup, you guessed it. He got all mixed up in the lucrative cocaine trade. Barbie may not have been physically dealing drugs, but he played a major role in making the cocaine trade grow in Bolivia, Peru, and Colombia. He became the middleman between drug kingpins and the government, military, and mercenaries. Talk about being knee-deep in corruption. But wait, there's more. When it looked like Barbie might face prosecution for his war crimes, the CIA and the Vatican teamed up to change his name to Klaus Altmann. With this new identity, he fled to Bolivia in 1951. There, he became a colonel in the Bolivian army and enlisted the help of terrifying terrorists called the Fiancé of Death. He advised the Bolivian military on interrogation and torture techniques, just pure evil. And get this, he teamed up with some of the most feared drug lords in the region, including none other than Pablo Escobar. They most likely traded weapons and more, but Barbie's main buddy was Bolivian warlord Roberto Suarez Gomez. These two were inseparable in the early 1980s, all fueled by cocaine cash. They were both paranoid, Barbie fearing a communist revolution that would deport him to France for trial, and Gomez wanting to expand his cocaine empire without any legal consequences. So what did they do? They orchestrated a military coup to install General Luis Garcia Meza Tejada as commander of the army and later as president in 1980, all funded by, you guessed it, cocaine cash. He was, however, not the only Nazi with ties to the cartel, and that takes us to the story of Carlos Lehder, a man with a mix of German and Colombian blood. Carlos Lehder is a man of diverse German-Colombian heritage. His father, Klaus Wilhelm Lehder, left Germany and migrated to Armenia, Colombia in 1928, where he played a vital role in constructing several innovative buildings equipped with elevators, an unusual and modern feature for that era and location. After marrying Helena Rivas, the daughter of a jeweler from Manizales, Caldas, he adopted the name Guillermo Lehder, which was the Spanish equivalent of the name. Together, Guillermo and Helena were blessed with 4 sons, and among them was Carlos Enrique, born on the 7th of September 1949, who was the 3rd son in the family. Now hold on a second. Remember Guillermo Kahlo, the father of that famous Mexican painter Frida Kahlo? Well, it turns out Klaus took a page out of his book and adopted the name Guillermo to fit right into the new Spanish-speaking community. Smart move, Klaus. The Lehder family had it going on. They owned this cozy inn called Pensión Alemana, a hotspot for German immigrants to chill and hang out. But the U.S. got wind of some secret intel and suspected that the inn was like a secret lair for Nazis, so they shut it down. Now, Carlos was growing up in this mix of Colombian and German culture, but when he was 15, his parents decided to part ways. So he and his mom packed their bags and jetted off to the land of dreams, New York City. And oh boy, that's where the real adventure kicks in. After some not-so-legal ventures, he found himself in federal prison, rubbing shoulders with a guy named George Jung, a former marijuana dealer. And guess what? These two decided to team up for the ultimate cocaine caper. You see, Carlos had a light bulb moment in prison. He saw the rising demand for cocaine in the United States, so he struck a deal with Jung, who knew a thing or two about smuggling stuff from Mexico in small planes, staying all sneaky below radar level, and landing on dry lake beds. Carlos spent hours grilling his fellow inmates about money laundering and smuggling. Some say he had more files and notes than your grandma's recipe collection. His master plan was to revolutionize the cocaine trade by using small aircraft to transport drugs for the Medellin cartel directly to the U.S. Carlos Lehder was all about pushing the boundaries and taking risks, which came with significant rewards. The Medellin cartel found Carlos Lehder's enterprise useful for reaching the American markets. So, in the late 1970s, Carlos's partnership with George Jung started to hit some rough patches. Why, you ask? Well, it seems Carlos had some big dreams of owning his own private Bahamian island to use as his all-purpose drug empire headquarters. And guess what? He made that dream a reality with Norman's Cay. Picture this: a marina, a yacht club, private homes, and even an airstrip. Carlos began buying up property and intimidating the island's residents, making it clear that he meant business. Rumors even say there was a dead body found on a drifting yacht. As Carlos seized control of the island, it became his own lawless kingdom. He kicked George Jung out of the operation and brought in international criminal financier Robert Vesco as a partner. Norman's Cay became the Caribbean's hotspot for drug smuggling, and it was like a tropical playground for Carlos and his crew. Establishing connections with the Medellin cartel and Escobar, they'd fly in tons of cocaine from Colombia on all sorts of aircraft, reloaded into smaller planes, and distributed all over Georgia, Florida, and the Carolinas. Carlos was swimming in cash. He'd keep 1 kilo of coke for every 4 that passed through the island. Talk about rolling in dough. Carlos had some crazy security measures in place: a 300-foot runway, radar, bodyguards, and even attack dogs to protect his stash. At the peak of his operation, 300 kilograms of coke would land on the island every day. Can you imagine the party he was having? This dude's wealth was beyond imagination. He even offered to pay Colombia's external debt twice. He wanted to stay away from extradition, so he tried making deals with presidents and influential figures. Eventually, Carlos Lehder's island party came to a screeching halt. The Bahamas, probably under some pressure from the United States, started cracking down on drug smuggling in Norman's Cay. Carlos then hightailed it back to Colombia and decided to make his mark in his home turf of Armenia. But let me tell you, his actions started raising eyebrows real quick. First of all, he built a swanky hacienda and started spreading money all over the place. But that's not all. Imagine having a statue of John Lennon on your front lawn. Talk about an eccentric touch. And get this, he even bought the state government a modern airplane as a gift. Who does that? Lehder, that's who. But wait, it gets crazier. Lehder had a major political awakening in the 1980s, and I'm not talking about any ordinary political views. Nope, he went full-on neo-Nazi mode, praising Hitler and denying the Holocaust. He even had a party called the National Latin Movement with a fascist populist program, which was a mimicry of the Nazi Party. And get this, he wanted to take down Colombia's extradition agreement with the U.S. He saw cocaine as a way to fight back against imperialism, calling it Latin America's atomic bomb. I mean, talk about being on a whole other level of delusion. But you know what they say, power and drugs can mess with your mind. And Lehder's megalomania started messing with his relationship with Pablo Escobar. Escobar knew Lehder had gone off the deep end, and their friendship turned sour. It set the stage for Lehder's ultimate undoing. Not Nazi cartels today. Let's get back to what made Odyssey 007 confused. These images are linked to the infamous Sinaloan cartel, a real big deal in the world of organized crime. These guys are like the big bosses of illegal drug trafficking and money laundering. They've got their hands in all sorts of illegal items: cocaine, heroin, meth, fentanyl, cannabis, you name it. This cartel started back in the late 1980s as a part of the Guadalajara cartel's crew, but boy did they grow fast. Now they're a major player not only in Mexico, but all over Latin America, and even have their reach in the good old US of A. And here's the kicker. The United States intelligence community thinks they're the top dogs, the big cheese, the most powerful drug trafficking organization on the planet. Move over, Pablo Escobar, because the Sinaloa cartel is giving your Medellin cartel a run for its money. The cartel became the big shot, the top dog, the numero uno supplier of illegal drugs to the good old US of A during Guzman's epic reign. They were like the Amazon Prime of drug trafficking, delivering all sorts of goodies. But here's the dark side, folks. This crew is not afraid to get their hands dirty. Kidnappings, torture, and straight-up slaughter of rival gangs, oh they, went all out. And don't even get me started on their crazy stash of weapons. Rocket-propelled grenade launchers? Check. Gold-plated AK-47? Yep, they got that too. Now, you might have heard of El Chapo Guzman, right? He has escaped prison twice and has been caught 3 times. Currently, he's serving his time in an American prison. But even after his arrest, this crew ain't backing down. They got new leaders like Ismael Zambada Garcia, aka El Mayo, and his sons, Jesus Alfredo Guzman and Ivan Archivaldo Guzman Salazar, taking charge. While El Chapo himself might not be personally linked to the Nazis, his son Archivaldo Guzman, who is also one of the leaders of the Sinaloa cartel, has been linked to Nazi ideologies. How do we know these pictures are linked to the Sinaloa cartel, you may ask? See that logo? Yep, that's the cartel trademark. But wait, what's that lurking in the corner? It's the Nazi flag. Now I know what you're thinking. What on earth is the connection? Well, it's pretty clear there's some level of affinity going on. It's like they're secret buddies or something. Another gang affiliated with Nazi, or at the very least look up to the Nazis, are the Z's, also known as the Los Zetas. These guys used to be the meanest and scariest drug cartel in Mexico. You don't want to mess with them. Now let me tell you, Los Zetas aren't the kind to play nice. Nope, they're all about brutal shock and awe tactics, beheadings, torture, and indiscriminate murder. You name it, they've done it. And it's not just drugs they're into. They've got their fingers in all kinds of illegal pies, and guns rackets, protection rackets, kidnapping, and the list goes on. They like to mimic the Nazi blitzkrieg tactic, moving fast before their rival know what is coming. On May 16, 2009, Los Zetas executed a brazen and audacious escape plan in Zacatecas that bore a striking resemblance to the Nazi blitzkrieg tactic. This incident demonstrated their willingness to go to extreme lengths to free their comrades from captivity. Under the cover of darkness, a well-coordinated group of more than 30 heavily armed individuals, believed to be Zetas, launched their attack. They arrived in a convoy of trucks that were deceptively adorned with logos of the Federal Investigative Agency, which had recently replaced the Mexican Federal Judicial Police. This clever ruse allowed them to enter the Cieneguillas penitentiary without raising immediate suspicion. As the operation unfolded, a helicopter hovered overhead, adding to the intensity and swift execution of their plan. In a display reminiscent of the Nazi blitzkrieg strategy, which involved rapid and overwhelming force, the assailants stormed the prison with swift and decisive action. During the blitzkrieg assault, Los Zetas managed to liberate a staggering total of 53 prisoners. Among the freed inmates were fellow members of the Zetas cartel and members of the Beltran Leyva crime family, along with other dangerous drug-related felons. The scale and audacity of the attack left state and federal authorities stunned and scrambling to respond. In the aftermath of the escape, law enforcement agencies immediately sprang into action, attempting to apprehend the fugitives and investigate the prison staff involved in facilitating the daring escape. The prison director and 50 of his subordinates came under intense scrutiny as authorities sought to determine if they had any role in aiding the Zetas. Despite the chaos, authorities managed to recapture several of the escaped prisoners, including one notorious individual named Osvaldo the Vampire Garcia Delgado. Garcia Delgado was a kidnapping specialist affiliated with the Los Cotorros gang, which coordinated activities with Los Zetas in the state of Hidalgo. This brazen escape in Zacatecas demonstrated Los Zetas' willingness to employ bold and unconventional tactics, even drawing parallels to Nazi military strategies. The incident highlighted the formidable challenge posed by organized crime in Mexico and underscored the need for continued efforts by law enforcement to combat these powerful and ruthless criminal groups. The entire event, including the escape and subsequent manhunt, was recorded and became available for public public viewing on YouTube, further emphasizing the audacity and boldness of the cartel's actions. They used to be part of the Gulf Cartel, but in 2010 they were like, nah, we're out of here, and formed their own criminal empire. Talk about ambition. At one point, these guys were everywhere, taking over more territory than even the Sinaloa cartel. But things change, you know? Los Zetas got a bit fragmented, and their influence started to wane. But don't think they're out of the game just yet. They've formed alliances with other cartels to keep their grip on the underworld. In fact, they were even considered as foreign terrorist organizations by some, but Mexican President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador was like, hold on a sec, and put a stop to that plan. Politics, right? From the Zetas and their adoration of the Nazis, we go to a gang that's all about pretty old hate and violence. These are Nazi lowriders. These guys are no joke. They're a neo-Nazi, white supremacist organized crime syndicate and gang that operates both in and outside of prison. Based mainly in Southern California, they've teamed up with the Aryan Brotherhood, Mexican Mafia, and Public Enemy Number 1. You definitely do not want to mess with these guys. Back in the day, the Nazi lowriders started as a skinhead gang in the California Youth Authority, but then they evolved into a gang for young white inmates. And guess what? They were created by members of the Aryan Brotherhood, the big bosses of the white gangs in the California prison system. These guys have a history of hate crimes against African Americans. It's just sickening. They've carried out vicious attacks, beatings, and even a stabbing, all in an attempt to terrorize and drive black folks out of their communities. Can you believe it? One time, they attacked an African American Walmart employee with a hammer in a store parking lot. Pure evil. But guess what? Justice caught up to some of these monsters. One of their members, Trevor David Thompson, shot a 14-year-old African American girl in a drive-by, and he got sentenced to 30 years in prison for attempted murder. According to prosecutors and hate group trackers, the Nazi lowriders have become a formidable presence within California's racially divided prisons and jails. California prison authorities have designated them as a prison gang comparable to the Mexican Mafia or the Aryan Brotherhood. Members proudly display Nazi tattoos on their bodies and address each other as comrades or woods, a shortened form of peckerwoods. Their objectives are twofold: propagating white supremacist beliefs and expanding their criminal activities, as asserted by the government in the indictment. Assistant U.S. Attorney Charlene F. Olmeda, who is handling the case, emphasizes that they are not solely an ideologically driven hate group, but also a cohort of criminal white supremacists. Law enforcement authorities report that Nazi lowrider members have gained significant influence in the production and distribution of methamphetamines, commonly known as speed. Their criminal enterprise has made them major players in this illicit trade. While we are aware of the cartel organizations affiliated with Nazi ideologies, there are evidence of even more sinister and to some level speculative affiliation between Nazis and drugs. For example, in Peru, police found dozens of cocaine packages, all marked with creepy Nazi swastikas and the name Hitler. To say this is a surprise might be, well, during World War II, a number of German Peruvians were influenced by Nazi Germany and established their own branches of the Nazi Party in Peru. At that time, around 2,000 German Peruvians were residing in the country, with over 200 known active members of the Nazi Party in Peru. Prominent families like the Emmel and Springsmaller families in Arequipa, the Fisher family in Andahuelas, the Albrecht family in Cusco, and the Schaefer family in Piura were among those who openly declared themselves as Nazi Party members. Karl Dietering took the lead in organizing the Nazi Party in Peru, but much of the documentation related to the party was lost or deliberately destroyed by its members to avoid incrimination. The influence of the Nazi Party extended to various areas, and in the remote village of Pozuzo, the Nazi flag was raised on the town's flagpole. During the war, Peru's government complied with British blacklists targeting German businesses in the country. The Alexander Humboldt School in Lima became a gathering place for 5 branches of the Nazi Party, leading to the deportation of the school's director and teachers to internment camps in the United States for their leadership roles. Following Peru's decision to sever diplomatic ties with Germany in 1942, some naturalized German Peruvians were sent to internment camps in the United States. Many German Peruvians also placed their assets in the embassy of Francois, Spain, due to its proximity and association with Nazi Germany, resulting in around 3 million souls being deposited there by 1945. Now, fast forward back to 2022, and the cops are all trying to figure out if there are any links to Nazi groups in Peru. They're scratching their heads because there aren't any well-known Nazi groups there. Well, at the very least, openly Nazi. But who knows, maybe someone's just using it as a twisted style statement. Seriously? Using Nazis as a style? These cocaine packages, or bricks, were stashed away in a refrigerated container at the port of Paita. And guess what? They weighed a whopping 58 kilos and were worth a jaw-dropping $3 million. That's some serious drug money, right? There. Apparently, these drugs were destined to take a crazy trip across Europe. First stop, Belgium. From there, they planned to spread their toxic cargo to the Netherlands, France, and Spain. Man, these criminals really had big plans. Peru and Colombia are known for being the top producers of coca leaf and cocaine in the world, and it seems like the Peruvian authorities have their hands full because they seized a massive 86 tons of drugs and illicit substances last year alone. And there we have it, why cartels are Nazi fanatics. We hope that you enjoyed this video. To enjoy more, click on the cards on your screen.